Oh, test.
Okay, well, now I can speak softly. Yeah, because my voice is leaving anyways with this cold. I just get so impassioned with the opportunity to talk to somebody about this, and looking at the age group, except for you two, it's very encouraging. You're the future, I mean, so there's no question about it. He described to you a little bit the direction I'm coming from, which is direct democracy, your sovereignty. So feel free to interject some questions. Any questions that you'd have that you want to address me of what he was describing? Does that brought about any questions? No? Okay, well, think on it. Where I'm coming from is having been 16 years elective office. In Alaska, I was the Speaker of the House, and so it was one of three leadership positions for the whole state. The governor, the head of the Senate, and the House. But the House is always more important because it has a greater number. And then I got elected to the Senate, but I lost an election. Got elected. I've lost as many elections as I've won, and I lost the last one because the religious right in the United States had concentrated on trying to get me out of office. And it was good that they got me out, because I served 12 years in the Senate. That's enough. I believe in term limits. I think we should limit the amount of time anybody has power, because power is a corrupting influence. So after I left office, disillusioned with the system, then it took me about 10 years, and I came to the conclusion that there's only two venues for change, if you really want to bring about change. And that is the government, where the problem exists, or the people. There's no other place. And so if you continue to appeal for change within the government, it just will not happen. Because the structure of government is controlled by a small minority of elites. Whether they own them, control them, and the elites have devised, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, a corporate entity, a unit of governance. And so now today, we have corporations which, to understand, have no morality. They're amoral. They don't believe good or bad. What they believe is to make a profit for the shareholders of the corporation, and the managers, of course, exercise their greed by controlling the corporations, and they take unbelievable amounts of money to their personal wealth. 10, 20, $30 million a year. It's obscene that just a manager of a corporation could make that much money. And so what we see in the world today, and I primarily have experience within the United States, but I know it's the same thing in Europe, is that in the United States, 1% of the people receive 1/3 of the income. That means that the rest of the population has to subside on that. And then in addition to that, 1% controls 40% of the wealth in the United States. Now, that's the United. Now, fortunately, there's a new study out done in Zürich here by a foundation, and that they analyzed 43,000 corporations, and they winnowed it down to 1,350 corporations, primarily the leadership of which are banks, global banks, and that grouping of corporations, through their interlocking relationships, controls 60% of the world's wealth. Now, how do you address that or try to solve the problem? As I pointed out, there's only two venues: the government or the people. And I got to tell you from my experience, there's no hope that the government will solve that problem. It will continue to exacerbate the problem. And so the answer is the people. Well, those of you that are familiar, and I presume you're all from Switzerland here, or most of you, except her, okay? You're familiar with the fact that the Swiss can make laws by initiative. And it's the only nation in the world where you have it at the federal level. In the United States, in the late 1898 and around the turn of the century, prior to the First World War, the United States copied Swiss law. And so that we have initiative in 24 states. The initiative in only about 10 or 12 states are any good. The rest of them are all just trash. And trashed, what I mean is that representative government, because they're intermeshed, representative government has sabotaged so bad this process. Please come on and sit up front. They've trashed the process so bad that it doesn't work in those states. And in the states that it does work, it works very imperfectly because the judiciary primarily sabotages the people's efforts, and of course the politicians use the judiciary so they don't get their fingerprints on the damage they try to do. But it's a constant effort over time to continually sabotage the states that we have in the United States. And they'll do it. I'll give you an example. In Massachusetts, where we filed an initiative for a new 9/11 investigation, we had to collect over 100,000 signatures in 2 months. Unless you can write the check immediately for that cost, which is around $300,000, you don't have a prayer of getting it on the ballot. In California, you need about $1.5 million to get something on the ballot. So that process doesn't work. With the same thing in Switzerland, with knowledge that I have, and it's been several years that I've been to your capital, I've lectured on the subject, I met with your legislators back then, and it's the same thing here. You know, to get anything meaningful passed can take 2 years. Well, if you got an emergency problem, that doesn't address it. Plus, your support may dwindle in that period of time, and then many times you can't get it up at all. So the Swiss, what I observed in the Swiss model, and which was copied in the American model, is as long as you marry together representative government and the actions of the people will always be sabotaged by the elements of representative government. And it's not that these people are bad. Their thinking is different. They think because they're elected to office that they know more than the people. Well, it's a proven fact that's not the case. The majority of the constituency of any person is smarter than the leader of that constituency. That's a given scientific fact. It's not disputable. So the problem you have is that they have a mindset that they know what's good for you. Now, that's a trap. I found when I was in the Senate that when people came forward with a complex piece of legislation, they said, oh, this is too complex. You don't have to understand it. Just trust me. Well, that's the first mistake you make, is that and I say this as dogmatic, if a law is not common sense, that ordinary people can understand it, it should never be the law. Because it's a device to make things so complex that you're being screwed in your head and you don't know it because you're being manipulated. Now, corporations manipulate us from the whole commercial approach, the psychology. Here, corporations are successful and wealthy because they know how to manipulate people. If they're successful, they're good at manipulating you. So you can take that as a given. So now when you're aware of that, you have to try to address is, well, how are we going to get around this? And I've labored on this subject for 25 years and maybe more, and I've come to the conclusion that we can't trust the government. Oh, they'll make some progress, but it's so minuscule. And the progress they make is you take one step forward on progress and then 10 steps back on control. And so the name of the game is to control the people so that you can get them to do what you want, whether it's to buy your product, which may be unhealthy, and you see as a result of that obesity, which is probably the biggest disease in the world we have now in the wealthy countries. And so they now, when they have a problem, I'll give you an example. You want to know how stupid, and the word is stupid, a legislative body can be. Now, you've all heard great things about the Congress of the United States. Great superpower, okay? We have a law on the books that when the Republicans passed a prescription drug plan for the elderly, people like me, that the government would buy the prescriptions and transfer it to the citizens, okay? By law, the federal government cannot negotiate with Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical industry, for a volume discount. Now, anybody knows that if you buy a lot rather than a few, you should get a discount. There's a volume, there's more profit. Now, this is the law of the United States of America. It was passed during George Bush, and that law has not been changed. Now, if anybody wants testimony to how idiotic a Congress can be of all of these wonderful leaders, I mean, it doesn't get any sicker than that. And that's the word, it's sick. It's sick. And so you have to turn around and say, well, do we put up with that? And I'm sure if I did the research here in Switzerland for you, I'll give you examples that are equal to that. I just know enough about representative government that I can dig out the facts and give them to you. So now your question becomes, well, wait a second. You're describing something where I'm stuck and I'm being screwed every day and I can't do anything about it. Well, that's not so. I'm an optimist. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here traveling Europe with a cold and at my age. I believe there is an answer. And as I pointed out, there's only two venues for change. The government, where the problem exists, or the people. Now, if the people are going to change what needs to be done, they need something very important. And it's not just out there protesting and wishing. That's great. And I was talking to a young man earlier this morning, and I admire Gandhi. I admire Martin Luther King. I admire Nelson Mandela. You know, more Mandela than Gandhi, and as much as King, because what Mandela did, he did the impossible. He took a racist country and turned it right around. And of course, it was unfortunate, he was an old man, so he didn't have as many years. It would have been great. But then again, maybe it took the 26 years in prison to bring about this depth of maturity that he has. And so he came to the realization that, one, you could do something with leadership, but that leadership is so rare in the world, so rare that you can't rely on it. So you have to rely on yourselves. Because you see, when I said the future is yours, if the future is going to be screwed up, it's going to be your fault. Because it's going to be totally your fault. Because the tool is at hand for you to make a difference. And what is that tool? What is the central power of government? Not the president, not the prime minister. Oh, that's where the celebrity is. That's where the bullshit goes on, where they just feed it to you by the spoonful. No, and it's not in the judiciary, because the judiciary can only interpret what they see. And they give you case law, and it's so narrow, and the judiciary is so sold out to the conventional wisdom and to the elites. So you're not going to get anything in. And so is it the legislature? Of course it's the legislature. And so these representatives, they make laws. They make laws that favor the 1%, the banking interest, the corporate interest. They get all the laws they want. Here, I figured in the United States, I don't know what it is in Switzerland, but I think the latest figure is there's 37 lobbyists for every member of Congress. You think you got a chance in dealing with the members of Congress? Not a prayer. And I don't say that with derision. I know that most people that go into public life do it with a sincere desire to make a difference. But they find out very shortly that you don't make a difference unless you go along to get along. And the minute you begin to compromise, then what happens? They got you. And once they got you, then, and if you don't shape up, they get rid of you. In the United States, you cannot become president of the United States if you run afoul of AIPAC, the Jewish community that controls the country. You can't even think of running for president. It's not a prayer that you would have. Well, these are the realities. Or if you're an atheist, I've never met a member of Congress who's an atheist. Now, what we do is some of us, we say we're Unitarians. That's code, Thomas Jefferson code for an atheist or agnostic. But you don't see that admitted. Now, Europe is a little more mature when it comes to religion because you've had more pain suffered as a result of Christianity, which has killed more people in human history than any other institution. So now, the question is you have to appreciate that the central power of government is lawmaking. And that's how they trap you. They pass a law that you have to obey. They pass a law that favors the banks. And they pass a law that favors pharmaceuticals. And it's done all the time. That's why they have lobbyists. So the answer is that you have to become equipped to make laws. How do you do that? Very difficult. I don't know of a plan other than the one I'm proposing. Oh, I hear a lot of people are going to have a parliamentary system or we're a federal. Here, they don't get to the point. How do you take it from there where you got none to there when you got some and it's written down? It's not a question of, I was talking to a young man earlier today. He said, oh, we need more sharing. I agree. We need love. If there's anything that motivates me, it's love. We need love of fellow human beings, sharing. Capitalism is a cruel, greedy system. It needs to be ameliorated so that you have sharing, so that people care about the commons. They care about what we collectively need. And keep in mind, government is very important. It's the only tool we have to act collectively. But it's owned by this small minority. So it doesn't even inure to our benefit. And so now I've written a law. It's taking me 7 years to write this law. It's called the National Citizens Initiative. I've written it for the United States to meet our Constitution. I've written it for South Korea to meet their Constitution. I spent 3, because I don't know if you recall the candlelight visions, candlelight protests that you had in South Korea. Only the Koreans would think this. They got to work during the day to make themselves successful, so they would protest at night with candles. That's why they call it the candlelight movement. It was beautiful. And so that's why I went to Korea. I was trying to organize, and here I did. Had a young man, 32 years old. His parents happened to be wealthy, so he spends all of his time, funds this, pulls in other people, and so we organized. And I spoke at universities. I've spoken at all the major universities in Korea, and organized it, and so hoping to transfer it to the candlelight movement. And when I left, that's what we were supposed to be doing. But I know Lee Myung-bak, who's the president of South Korea, he's George Bush incarnate. And it's that bad. It's just that bad. We could solve the problem with North Korea. North Korea. All we got to do is take the 50,000 American troops off of the peninsula, and North Korea would implode within 3 years. It's just a sick situation. During the presidential campaign, I happened to be the last one in a row, and the moderator asked, "Well, who are our enemies?" And fortunately, I was at the end, and they all did the same: North Korea, Iraq, Iran, some whispering China, Russia, and so it got to me. I said, "You don't have any enemies. We make our enemies because we need enemies in order to fund these crazy amounts that we spend to defend, quote, we're the self-anointed policemen of the world." I'll tell you, the sooner we stop being the policemen of the world, the better off the world is going to be. So now I've got this law out there. It's called, that I've written, and I wrote it with other people. I would vet it with scholars. I would go around and speak at law schools, and I'd lay it out, waiting for somebody to challenge it. And it got challenged here, got challenged there. And from that process, over a 7-year period, that's how I came to the document that we have. And it's not compromise. Compromise is settling. You got a good idea, he's got a bad idea, so we take a middle idea, which is good and bad. We'd be better off to go with the good idea than to hell with the bad idea. But no, that's not the way the system works. We've got to, reasonable people compromise. So reasonable get lousy government. That's really what happens. So now you get a situation, we didn't compromise, so we have a law, and it's made up of 2 elements. A constitutional amendment. If you got a constitution, we'll amend it. And for my friend Annie Michon, who I want to introduce over there, who's a whistleblower, former MI5 agent, who told the truth, of course got run out of the government. But she's the one that's responsible for the tour I'm making, along with Fred, my being here. And we discover each other. That's how we find. Like I'm discovering you and you're discovering me. So now we've got this legislation. It's got a constitutional amendment. What does it say? It says that you are asserting, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's literally the text. You, when you vote for this constitutional amendment, you are asserting your sovereign power to be able to make laws and change constitutions. That's all it says. But you know something? It didn't have to say it on paper. It's a fact. You are sovereign of your body because you're born. You're a human being. That's what makes you sovereign. And when we come together as a group, we transfer our individual sovereignty to the group. And when it's governed, it's called the polity. And so it's us, the people, that are the sovereigns of the polity. But we got sold a bill of goods back by the British in the evolutionary process and by the American Constitution. And the American Constitution turned around, keep in mind, in 1776, the Americans declared that essentially all human beings are created equal. 11 years later, they turn around and establish slavery for infinity in the American Constitution. So when you hear these Tea Party people, we've got to go back to the Constitution, it's just a bunch of crap. The Constitution, which everybody reveres, to me is a piece of paper written by people who put their pants on one leg at a time, just like we do. And they're all dead. Why do we have to live by the rules that they set up? We essentially govern ourselves in the world by a process of governance that was established over 230 years or more, if you go back to what was happening in the Age of Enlightenment. Why do we have to buy into that? It's called, in legal jargon, the dead hand of the past. Well, my view is amputate the dead hand of the past and deal with the living. And what's interesting is that all of the founders, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Wilson, they all said over and over again that the people in the future should be able to change their government to satisfy their needs and to provide for their happiness. You know something? When they wrote the Constitution, they never gave us the procedures to do it with, because they knew that the people would not buy slavery. And so when you hear people criticize what I'm talking about, what they're criticizing is what they know. They know how bad representative government is. They don't know how good direct democracy would be, because there's no place in the world that you have it. The closest you have it is in Switzerland. And it's been very successful, except it's not good enough for the 21st century. And so we put forth a constitutional amendment, and I have a personal prejudice, and that's money in politics. And so there's an amendment to the Constitution that says that money, not about representative government. I do not attack representative government in this legislation. We got enough to chew with this. And I say that money that does not come from a natural person cannot be used in politics of the initiative. What does that mean? That means corporations, associations can't use any money. So right away, you solved, with initiatives, you solved the advantage of corporate personhood, right from the passage of this. Now, we don't solve it over here in representative government. The legislation that this is, it's called meta-legislation. It's fundamental. It's more fundamental than the Constitution, in point of fact, because it's completing the work of the Age of Enlightenment, where human beings realized that they were sovereign. And it's now giving you the power of full sovereignty, and the central power of that is lawmaking. Now, in the other part of this legislation is the Legislative Procedures Act. Because if you're going to make laws, and under this, you can make laws in every jurisdiction of the United States, or if you pass it in Switzerland, you'll make laws in every jurisdiction of Switzerland, independent of representative government in Switzerland, with their legislation that they have for the nation. Leave that in. The minute people see this, they will never want to go back to that legislation that they have already for the initiative. Because now they will be able to act over here as human beings, as the sovereigns. Now, there's a real catch to this. Because the minute you bring the people into the operation of government independently as legislators, it's a partnership. Partnership with representative government. But lo and behold, the people become the senior partners. Now, if you've ever been involved in a partnership or corporation, the senior partner is the senior partner. He tells you what to do if you're a junior partner, okay? So now, if you turn around and create this legislation and you make yourself independent in Switzerland, the people making laws, now they can make a law and the legislature may turn around and change it. It may be worth changing. Maybe we made a mistake. But I'll tell you, if the people pass a law and the legislature changes it, and the people pass it again, the legislature won't change it. They're not dumb. Politicians are not dumb. They're cowards, but they're not dumb. And so what they'll do is they'll change the way they operate. And so I maintain this becomes a win-win situation, because the people will set policy and the representative government will implement it. Because it's a day-to-day operation. And as a citizen making policy, you don't want to be, you want to go on with your lives, but you want to be able to make policy. And I'll tell you, it's not going to be very complicated. You can make 10, initially I would guess that you'd see about 10 major policy decisions in the first 2 years. After that, it would be 2 or 3 a year that you'd have to do, just to keep the legislative representative government in line. That's what we're going. Then when it comes to going to war, now this isn't a problem in Switzerland, but it's in most other countries, I maintain that the people are the ones that should decide whether to go to war or not. Because as soon as that happens, you're going to have a lot less wars automatically. So that's the legislation that I have. And that legislation, as I say, I've designed it for Korea. I could help design it with people here in Switzerland. I could design it for France. I could design it for Britain, even though they got the Queen and the fact that the royalty of noblesse oblige, the sooner we straighten that out, the better off the Brits are going to be. But they can still keep the Queen. If they want to fund that, that's their problem. But the people are sovereign in Britain, regardless of what anybody. You see, let me repeat. You are sovereign not because it says it on a piece of paper. You are sovereign because it says it on your birth certificate that you were born. You're born a human being. That's what makes you sovereign. So I've thrown that much out. Maybe we could have a dialogue and you could ask questions or make statements. It'll save my voice. But there must be a question somewhere in these beautiful faces.
Well, first, I would like to applaud you for.
Thank you. I don't come here for applause. I come to be challenged. I want you to use your brains to challenge my brain. That's what I want. That's where my pleasure comes from. And if I can't respond to your question properly, then don't believe me. Go ahead.
What are you thinking about the central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank? Because this also constitution amendment is something that they didn't want to have at first, but then some nice guys came and made this idea.
You're familiar with Ron Paul's position?
Yeah.
I know Ron Paul. He's a constitutionalist. I'm not. I would say this. I don't think I'm smart enough to design a banking system. I'm not that expert. It's not where I spent my time. But I'll tell you this. I get scared to death that when they do away with the Federal Reserve, they're going to have the Congress of the United States setting monetary policy, and that is going to be terribly. I mean, you think the Congress is irresponsible now, give them full control of the monetary system, and my God, how quickly we'll go into bankruptcy. So the question is, I can't answer your question because I don't think I'm smart enough. But I'll tell you what, I want to give you the tool, give the tool to the people, and I think they're smart enough to figure it out. You don't need me. What I'm doing right now is all I'll ever be able to do for you, is put something in front of you to empower you to do what you think is the way it should be handled. And it'll be handled in a process of dialogue. I hope that answers your question. Please.
You said in the US, you need for 100,000 signatures, you need $200,000 or $300,000. Here in Switzerland, when a party wants to get an initiative, they just go on the street and they do it for free. They just collect how much they can. Why is it in the US that they have to earn money for that?
Because they want to fix it so that the people cannot exercise their legislative power. It's a sabotage. Every state, here you got some states that pass a law, it's been declared unconstitutional, that I live in California now. I can't go into, I forget which state it was, I can't go get signatures because I come from California. What's that all about? That's to make it difficult. When we were doing an initiative in Missouri, every document where you had signatures, we had to have it notarized. Now, you know, that's expensive to get a notary. So we hired this elderly gentleman who had a notary. He sat in the back room, and as our signature gatherers came in, they would give him the documents, and all day long, he was notarizing them. And it cost, I forgot what, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to pay for this guy to do it. It was ridiculous. It had nothing to do with establishing the veracity of the signatures. So the answer to your question is, let me repeat again. I can't say it too strongly. Representative government will always attempt to sabotage the people's lawmaking ability. For the very simple reason, it dilutes their power. And they scratch their way to leadership. And then all of a sudden, you think they're going to sit there and help you dilute their power? I mean, you're dreaming. They just worked their heart out. They sold their soul to get ahead. And you think they're going to dilute their power? Never going to happen. And so and I can do this in any area with a little bit of research, and you could do it too. Just begin to analyze. Does that make sense? Now, but when you're telling me that what I was advocating here, I would love to have Switzerland turn around, because see, right now, the Swiss, whenever we have a conference, the Swiss embassy finally woke up that, oh, we got something that the world admires. You know, we got, quote, democracy by the people. But it's not very good. It's not good. It can be made better. And what I'd love to do is to turn around, because your government is going to have to own up to this in foreign countries. And I've been to receptions in Swiss embassies in at least 5 countries. And it's always the same thing. They pay for this wonderful reception. They're so proud to be Swiss, and we have direct democracy. Well, when we improve it, and here's how we improve it. We turn around and we create this legislation to match your constitution. Put it in English, French, you got 4 languages here, translated in all 4 languages. And then people like you to get some spare time, you go with the ballot, not a petition. Keep in mind, there's a difference. A petition means you're begging. We're not begging, we're sovereigns. We're exercising our sovereignty. So you go around door to door. You do it on the internet. And we're doing it on the internet right now. You could go vote, go to ni4d.us and you can vote. I tell foreigners, vote. We'll purge it out later. But go vote so you get the experience of knowing you're voting on the internet. You're not just giving your opinion. And so in Switzerland, what you would do is you would put this document out there. And you don't give it to the government. All you may, as a courtesy, show it to somebody in government. But you stay away from the government. They got their job to do. Let them do it. Your job is to act as a sovereign. And so now as a sovereign, you're saying, I'm going to vote to empower myself to be able to make laws independent. Now, you can make laws in Switzerland, but you're not independent. If they want to enforce the law, they decide if they want to do that. They got all of these traps that they can funnel you into a labyrinth that you may never get out of. And so you go around and you ask people to vote. Now, what's great about Switzerland, it's the people, not the government. It's the people have a sense that they are sovereigns and they expect to. And they get angry when they don't see their decisions adhered to by the government. So now you ask them, what we're doing is we're putting forth a new system for you to exercise your sovereignty by initiative. And President, well, is that legal? Well, we'll come back to that. Is it legal? So President, is that legal? You say, yes, it is, and you can give me some documents to show this, some reasoning documents that I can provide you. And so a person looks at it, and you sign it. You stand at the mall. You take all these wonderful people that are up there, camped up there. During the day, rather than hang around the tent, they could go from mall to mall, store to store. They could walk the street.